Thank you very much thank you very much for everyone for attending this first virtual Borough Plan Advisory Committee, and big thank you to Merton officers for their help in organising this today. So my name's Councillor Aidan Mundy. I'm the chair of the committee, and if we wouldn't mind just doing a very quick round of names, starting with those who are on the phone. So can we go with Najib first?
Najib Latif, Councillor Najib Latif from Wimbledon Village Ward.
Brilliant. Geraldine?
Pixmarsh Ward. Did you hear me then?
Yeah, go again.
All right. Councillor Geraldine Stanford, Pixmarsh Ward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So from the top, Kyle?
Councillor Carl Quilliam from West Barnes Ward.
Dennis?
Dennis Pearson from Hillier Ward.
And Linda?
Councillor Linda Kirby, Graveney Ward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And because we've got Najib, Councillor Latif rather, and Councillor Stanford on the calling in, I will ask them to come at the beginning of every bit of business we've got, because I can't see them put their hand up. And we've also got officers from our Future Merton team. So we've got Tara Butler, Eban, who will be discussing the South London Waste Plan, and we've got Jill, who is also on the call, who will be discussing the local list in the next few minutes. So I anticipate the meeting not going longer than between 8:30 and 8:45, and we've got three main items of business today. So that is the local list and the final South London Waste Partnership Plan, and an update on the local plan policies. And before we go on to that, I just want to apologise for the slight delay in going live. As you can imagine, new things, sometimes a few technical difficulties. And if you're watching this, member of the public, local group, feel free to tweet me. I'm at Aidan Mundy. Can't promise to answer all your questions online, but at the very least, come back to it later on. So why don't we go with our first item of business? So that's the local list. Jill, would you mind just introducing this item briefly, and perhaps for those who are not familiar with what a local list is, explain what it is and more importantly, what it isn't?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. The local list is something that a lot of boroughs have, which recognises the value of historic buildings and structures within the borough, which are not of sufficient quality to be on the national list, but raises the profile of them, and which is important when it comes to planning decisions, etc. We consider a number of criteria: the architectural style, the age, history, social history as well, detailing, the group value, and building materials. The additions to the list are subject to public consultation. They are put forward by members of the public, council officers, community groups, and as I said, they are put to public consultation, and eventually we bring them to this committee, and that's to add things to the local list.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. So how I propose we review this item of business is, let's, if we may, discuss the general theme of it, of the local list, any questions we've got about the local list as matter of policy, and then go into each of the recommendations briefly for any questions, comments, diversions from recommendations. Can I get nods if that's a sensible approach for everyone? Brilliant. So why don't I go to those on the call first? Councillor Latif, do you have any? Oh, I can see. I think you've just dropped off the call. Actually, why don't we go to Councillor Stanford? Do you have any general questions or comments about the policy overall, or queries for Jill? I think Councillor Stanford's still muted. Ah, there you go.
Okay. No, I haven't got any comments on the overall policy. No.
Brilliant. No worries. Councillor Kirby?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm fine.
Good. Councillor Pearce?
I wondered, just to start with, to ask a question about, has the criteria changed in the last 10 years from what we used to agree to? Or is it
Cool.
still more or less the same?
Cool. Good question. Let me go to Councillor Quilliam before we get an answer to that. Councillor Quilliam.
Yeah, it's just a question about the consultation around the individual items. So there's a
Yeah.
number of items that haven't sort of had any comments as a result of the consultation. I wondered if that was sort of typical of this kind of consultation, and whether the consultation's been limited because of obviously what's been going on the last sort of few months or so.
Cool. Two good questions. Jill, would you mind chiming back in on those 2 points, please?
Yes, can you please repeat what the first question was, because I didn't really quite get it.
No, of course, no worries. So the first one is about the consistency of the policy over the last decade. Has there been any additions or changes? Perhaps you may want to touch on your also interpretation of it, given the change of development in the borough. And the second question relates to the level of engagement from the consultation you launched.
Yes, no, I got that. The things that we consider, no, it hasn't changed over the last 10 years. The process has changed because at one time it was just decided by councillors. Council officers, was just basically, and then ratified. But now it goes through a much fuller process, inviting people to the general public, community groups, to put forward things. It then is looked at by myself and other officers, and then it's put out to consultation, which is going into the other question, but it's put out to the community groups for consultation. It's the individual owners are written to, and sometimes we don't get responses back, and sometimes we do, but it's not unusual that we haven't had responses. But everybody, I write to every interested party that I know of. It is then brought to this committee. It then goes to cabinet and finally to full committee, full council. Is that the answer?
Does that answer the questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. Councillor Latif, I can see you just rejoined. Do you have a question on the general policy of local lists before we go into the actual individual items recommended?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay. So I've got an additional recommendation C, but I'll return back to that at the end of business. And I believe you would have seen that from my email response to one of our local community groups. So why don't we go through one by one. So the first one is the street lighting control cabinet on Hartfield Crescent. So I'll again, Councillor Latif and Stanford first. So Councillor Latif, any comments, additions, recommendations?
No, all good, Savine.
Councillor Stanford?
No comment, no.
Brilliant. And I'll just do again another round robin, starting with Councillor Kirby. Councillor Kirby first.
No.
Pierce?
Yes. Looking at the picture of it, I think I've seen it in real life. Is it just going to remain an object, or is it going to be put to any use if some particular company wants to use it?
Cool, we'll go back to that in a second. Councillor Quilliam, any questions or comments?
No, nothing to add.
Jill, please come back to us on that point.
The question being whether it has any use. Was that
Yeah,
the
if,
question?
yeah, if it would be
Yes.
put to use.
It will be put to use.
Not. I don't think it can be really. It's a item of interest. So a lot of the internal stuff, switching gear and everything, is still there. I don't think it can be put to any use. It's not very big. It's just very interesting and unusual and lovely.
Brilliant. Okay. So can we get nods of approval for this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Cool. And I've just been reminded that in my haste to get onto this stuff that I've missed the first two agenda items of first three agenda items of the business. I'll return to those shortly. But why don't we crack on? I assume, just to clarify, doing the first one because it's most important, we've not had no one has any declarations of interest on any of these items. No.
Well, the only comment I had about it was the fact that the adjacent property believed it was on his land and not on public land, which actually makes no difference to the proposal to locally list it. It was maybe who might maintain it, that's all, in the future.
No worries, but thank you, Jill. Brilliant. Well, anyway, I'll go back to the other bits of business, a bit of learning for myself as chaired, first time doing it virtually. Anyway, good stuff. So next one is the Ridgeway Stables. So that's 93 Ridgeway. Again, Councillor Latif, any comments?
No, fine, all good.
Councillor Stanford?
Do you hear me then?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fine, that one.
Good stuff. Councillor Kirby?
Fine. Thank you.
Pierce?
That's fine.
William?
Nope, nothing for me.
Good. Same here. Yeah, I understand from a few years ago there was a concern and it could change use, but clearly having this designation would support its retention. So the next item is the Manor Club Institute. Councillor Latif?
All okay for me.
Councillor Stanford?
Yes, okay for me.
Councillor Kirby?
I'm just concerned that there has hoarding around it. I just wondered if Jill could comment on what she knows is going on that site, please.
That's a good question. Why don't we just hold on 1 second, Jill. Councillor Pierce?
Okay.
Oh, is that me?
Yep.
No, I think that's fine.
And Councillor Quilliam?
No.
Cool. Yes, Jill, please do come back to us on that point about hoarding.
Yes. Well, it is has been subject to some pre-apps and planning applications on that one. So it's probably the hoardings are up in preparation for maybe some work, possibly converting it into residential, or something like that. I think that's all that's about. I don't think it's particularly under threat.
Okay. And your main concern for this particular building, could you just talk us through that? Is it?
Yes, well, the building next door, the one that has now become, or is in the process of becoming a church, is by the same architect, and that has been on the local list for a very long time. And it was felt that this building was of really possibly equal standing, and it was designed by Quartermain, who was a local architect who developed most of Merton Park area with one or two other architects. But it was designed and built for a special purpose, to be a club, for the local working man, and it has a significant social history as well as architectural history.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. I've got no further questions. Can I assume that everyone is happy for it to be added to the local list?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So next one is the John Innes cricket Pavilion. Councillor Tiff. Sorry, I think if we can unmute Councillor Latif.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah. Do you have any comments or
Any comments? No comments on.
No
that's
comments.
fine.
Councillor Stanford.
No comment.
Good.
Geraldine. If you didn't hear his first time.
Thank you very much. And sorry, why don't we just thinking about speeding this up? Raise of hands. Any questions, comments on this one? No. Brilliant. So I assume we are happy for it to be added to the local list.
Okay.
Brilliant. Next one is the Swan Public House, 89 Ridgeway. Councillor Latif.
Nope, I'm fine. No comments.
Councillor Stanford.
No comments.
Brilliant. Again, raise of hands. Any questions, comments, queries on that one? And we're all content for it to be added to the local list.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So the next one is a rather unusual one, I think anyway. So we've got the trolley bus traction pole on Burlington Road, flagged to us by a member of the public. Councillor Latif, any questions?
No questions at all.
Cool. Councillor Stanford?
No questions.
Brilliant. Anyone else? Hands up. Questions, queries, comments?
No.
All right. So we're happy to add this one to the list. The Vicarage, 16 Cops Hill. Councillor Latif.
Yeah, just one question. It says that the previous vicar considered it the ugliest in Christendom. Anyone's got comments on that?
Can you repeat that, please?
So
It's 2.8.7.
yeah. So the comment in the report by I think one of the previous owners said it was the ugliest building
Yeah.
they'd seen.
Okay.
Yeah, I must admit, I agree.
Any other comments?
Yeah, did you hear what I said?
I did. All right. Do we approve it being added to the local list or any?
Can we just get comments from Jill about this particular one because of the fact it has been described in such terms?
Very good point. Oh,
yeah.
I think Jill's just popped off for a second.
Right.
Why don't we? Let's go back to this. We'll go back to this one in a second when Jill's back because we've got a query.
Okay.
Let me just mark that. Cool. Next one, we've got the Morden Court Parade. So that's page 15, 2.9. Again, any comments, queries? Councillor Latif?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Yeah, no comments on that.
Councillor Stanford?
No. I like this very much. Art Deco. That's me.
Good.
Good.
Anyone else?
No.
Councillor Pearce?
Yeah, I must admit, I see this building or these buildings every time I come from my home to Morden, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's lovely.
It's a bit of a masterpiece, to be honest. It has improved it so much.
I think you're bang on there. It's a good example of a case study of how local neighbourhood funders supported the regeneration of a parade. Councillor Quilliam, any comments?
No, nothing to add to what people.
So I think we're happy with this one being on the local list.
Yeah.
Good. The next one, 20 Malcolm Road, submitted by the Wimbledon Society. Councillor Latif?
Yeah, just one comment. I see that one of the representative owners is dead against it being listed. Any comments from? Has the council officers gone?
Yeah, I'll tell you what then. Since we've got a particularly important question on that one, let's hold that off on that one and come back to it
Yep.
once Jill rejoins. So if we can skip ahead to, so it's page 19, item 2.11. So that's the street lamp outside Bertram Cottages. Again, Councillor Latif, questions?
No, looks good. Who's going to be maintaining these in the future? Is it the council or?
That's a very, very good question. Right, well, let's hold off that one then. Councillor Stanford, any questions as well on that one?
No, not really, but yes, it would be interesting to know who's going to maintain them. Yeah.
Hello, I'm back online.
Oh, hello. Hi. Brilliant. Cool. So,
sorry, I just suddenly lost you. Yeah.
Oh, no, don't worry. These things happen. So we're at 2.11, but we've skipped over 2 items because we had questions. So why don't we start back with 2.11, the street lamp.
Right.
And I'll do it. Let me complete my round robin of questions, and then we'll go back to it. So any other one? Anyone else got questions? Hands up on this particular one. Street lamp. No? So it was a question about the revenue costs, the ongoing maintenance of that street lamp. Would that be funded by the council?
Yes. Well, it's a street lamp which is generally maintained by the council anyway. So yeah, it's maintained by the council.
Okay. Councillor Pearce.
Yeah. Can I ask? Looking at this, has it always been electric, or were they originally gas? Because
I think they were always electric. I don't think these ones were gas.
Right. No, it's just that where I come from, there are at least 8 like this changed from gas to electric. I just wondered if these.
Well, on that, it's interesting. The report says there's a 3/4 inch gas. I assume that means on page 21, there's a gas pipe to it.
Yeah.
But cool. All right. So any further?
Well, I might. Yeah. I might. Yes. I don't know.
Oh no, I mean it's separate to that, to the material fact.
Yes.
Any further questions before we have a view? So are we happy with this being added to the local list?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back to the 2 items we missed over. So I'm going back to our favourite, the vicarage. So that's 2.8.
Right.
So Councillor Latif had a question. Do you want to recite the question again?
Yes. The previous vicar said it was actually quite an ugly building, and I was wondering why we're listing a building which has been classified ugly from the previous vicar. And have there been other comments from other residents? Or?
No, it's the only comment I've had. The reason we selected it is because it is quite an unusual building of that time. The architect David Rock was quite a prominent person, and it was built as a vicarage, allowing a large space downstairs for the sort of meeting rooms. And it's very much a purpose-built building, and is rather interesting that from that point of view, and also the materials that it's covered. It's based in copper, and it's an interesting building. That's why it's not the most beautiful one in the street. I give you that, but it is interesting.
Any other queries on that? Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, it does say when listing, and I know this locally, they normally are question marks when they change the exterior view. Now it says in here that windows have been changed. Has that made any difference to the look of it? Because it's the first time I've ever seen it, to be honest. And does it make any difference?
That's a good question. So, Jill, did you hear that question?
No, can you give?
Sure. So,
yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, Councillor Pearce asked, changing the material look of the building, so changing the windows, how much has that how did you take that into consideration when making a recommendation for this to be on the local list?
Well, yeah, the windows haven't been changed very much. There are one or two changes, but they are mainly around the back, actually, of the property. But the proportions of the windows have remained the same.
Okay.
It was windows going onto the garden at the rear that was had been altered.
Okay. Are we happy with any further questions, queries? No? Hands up if, okay, brilliant. Are we happy to have this added to the local list?
Yeah.
Yeah, if everybody's agreed to it, fine. But it wouldn't be right to.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I like the, well, lichen is a separate issue, but it's more an example of, you know, adapting an existing building. But all right, if we go back to 2.10, so that's 20 Malcolm Road, Councillor Latif had a question.
Oh, yes, thank you, Chair. I know that there was some local representatives who were against it being listed. And I also note that the front has been damaged. So could Jill sort of give us more information on why it's being listed and what can be done about the damage?
Well, it's, yes. The people that were wanting not to have it listed were basically the people who wanted to demolish it. Otherwise, locally, it was supported by residents in the road and by the Wimbledon Society. It's quite an interesting building. It's the oldest one in the road. And there, yes, it has been damaged, unfortunately, but hopefully with a suitable planning application, we'll be able to get those features restored. It is we refused planning permission on this, and it went to appeal, and the inspector said that this building should not be demolished and that it should be maintained and refurbished.
Is there a danger that if it's listed, then any future occupant or resident who wants to refurbish it will find it more difficult because of the restrictions imposed, especially in terms of cost?
Well, there will be scope, for doing work at the back, to make a house more modern, for modern living, as they say. But yes, I suppose if somebody takes it on, they're going to have a bit of a cost to restore some of the features at the front, which is what we're most concerned about, is the bay windows which wrapped round the corner, which has been taken off, which they were in a bad state. They would have had to be rebuilt, remade anyway. And also there was also on the back an interesting bay window as well that went sort of wrapped round. There had previously been an original conservatory on the side, which unfortunately the current owner decided to just remove. Mm-hmm. So it's had a bad time and it deserves some love.
Okay, I hope someone does step up and purchase it and do the refurbishment work, because I know the Wimbledon Society very well, so they obviously are very much concerned about this. But yeah, I hope someone does come up. Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Chair, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. I had to rush outside. Someone was banging on the door. I just want to make a comment about, we're still on Malcolm Road, aren't we?
We are, yeah.
I've worked with several people with houses like this. They just do this sort of thing because A, they don't want to pay the extra money it costs to do repair work on a listed building, and it's quite common. So unless it gets a new owner, won't get done.
My response to that is that you don't buy that house then.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I don't mean people are coming in. I mean the person who's already there.
No, of course, no. It's exactly that. Okay, got no further questions. Taking all that into consideration, do we want this on the local list to add that added protection?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Councillor, double checking. Councillor Latif and Stanford.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
So I was muted again, I think. Sorry. I think my only concern is, again, with what Dennis is saying, that it is very expensive to refurbish properties like this. And I'm just concerned, and hopefully Linda will agree with me, that it could be months before, or maybe years before, someone turns up, says, okay, I've got enough money now to refurbish this and put it back to its usual, self. That's the only thing I'm concerned about.
No, I agree as well on how the building could be utilised to meet the housing need in the meantime.
I mean, can we defer this? And
No.
No, I think given the pressing nature of the current deterioration. Councillor Stanford, what are your thoughts?
Well, does having locally listed status, does that give it the same kind of status as if it's not if it's getting pretty grotty and falling to bits? Can we still put it as in need of what's the word I'm looking for, Jill? The where it's on endangered.
It's on a list at risk.
Mm.
Yeah.
We don't actually have a local list at risk, but it has been suggested that by Historic England that perhaps we might consider having one.
Mm.
But I think that the owners that bought the property, we were told them right at the start that we would resist demolition.
Mm.
At the very early pre-act times, when it was not anywhere near in this state, we said we would resist demolition.
Yeah.
And they've just carried on trying to enforce that we allowed demolition, and now it's been, the inspectorate has said no, it shouldn't, which was really comforting to us.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the meantime, that they're going to be sitting on this property, letting it go. I mean, and because they own it, presumably, we can't make them do anything, can we? Just have to sit and watch it.
Well, I think there are steps that we can take. It's not the same as a statutory listed building where we can put a repairs order on, but we can. There are steps, whatever, that one can take.
Jill, why don't we, I'm going to take a question from Councillor Kirby, but why don't we come back to what steps we could take on this particular one in a second? Councillor Kirby, you had a question?
No, I was just going to say, I agree with Jill that, if my daughter's bought a grade listed building and spent an enormous amount of money on it, but they knew from the outset they would have to do that. And if they have been told at the outset that, this is a property of interest and it would be resisted and they've continued with it, then I think we do need to take, or need to have some power to take action over them doing absolutely nothing about it. So, I totally agree with Jill, and I think the building does need that extra protection if we can offer this. I think it's just one small step really to making it a bit more comfortable, but it's not going to solve the problem yet. I mean, it looks like that we will have to take some level of enforcement action against the owner.
And on that point, Jill, could you briefly come back to what, let's assume we do all agree about local listing, what's the next steps? What could you do as a possibility?
Well, I can certainly look into serving some sort of section on them to improve it. It's not not quite my area of knowledge, but I do know that there are steps that we can take when it's considered to be really a bad neighbour sort of thing, because you're not looking after your property.
Cool. Councillor Latif, would that be in line with your thinking?
If we can certainly make sure that the present owners are able to restore it, excellent. And maybe even if they haven't got adequate funds, maybe is there any grants available or something that the Merton Council can offer?
No, I don't think so. Statutory listed buildings, obviously, there are grants available, but not generally for local listing. I don't think there is the money around, unless you can find some.
Okay, so I think we've talked a lot about this one. Do we agree to locally list 20 Malcolm Road?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, brilliant.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you. Brilliant. Back on to the order of things. So 2.12. So it's the group of houses on Bathgate Road. So again, I'll just call in Councillor Latif. Any questions, queries?
Yes. Now, I do recall some of these came in the planning committee. Linda, do you remember? Offhand. Now, I also see there's some comments that I think one of the residents said that because of the planning permission granted, it will, or any damage may have already been done, or they can't really, even local listing it now won't stop the planning permission that's been granted.
That's a good point.
So I just, I would like to ask Jill, if we are listing it, what about the I think I can't remember which ones they were actually. I'm just trying to think offhand if I knew.
Yes, I know.
70 was it 70 Bathgate Road? Yeah. So that was my question and query actually.
Yeah, cool.
Yes.
Can we go back? Sorry, Jill. 1 second. If I just ask Councillor Stanford, any questions on this one?
No, nothing.
Cool.
Nothing bad. No.
Thank you. Hands up. Any other questions? No. Sorry, Jill. Please do come back on Councillor Jill's.
Yes. I mean, because there have been some unfortunate planning applications on these houses, is one reason why I wanted to get them on the local list, to raise their profile, to try and put a halt to inappropriate alterations and extensions, because they're lovely houses. They're a lovely group, influenced by Bocklesby, although he didn't actually build them. And that was one way of trying to preserve them. Some of the damage has been done, but trying to stop further damage to these lovely cottages, little houses.
Okay. So do we agree that the group of houses should be put on the local list?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Councillor Latif?
Yes.
And Councillor Stanford?
Yes.
Good. All right. Excellent. So next on 2.13, the cast iron sewer vent. Being a bit of an engineering geek, it was good to know there's a bit of local heritage linked to the council. Does anyone have any questions on this item? Again, going to Councillor Latif.
Is this on Wimbledon Common? So is it the Wimbledon Conservatory who own this?
Probably, I suppose it is. Yes.
And will they be responsible for its future maintenance?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's on, because it's actually on that little semicircle bit.
Is
at
that
the top
the council
of,
or is that the conservators?
I don't know. I'm not absolutely sure.
If it's on the conservators'
I'm
land, I presume you need to ask them.
Yes.
And get their opinion.
Yes. I don't think I did write to them. I think I wrote to our sort of street furniture people, because I think it's not actually on the Commons side. It's on the
Merton side.
you know, the south side of south side. Yeah.
So,
there has been talk about things like this, whether we can put some funds aside to maintain them, paint them, you know, get them, bring them up to standard.
Just to summarise, sorry, your assertion is that they are, that basically it's on Merton, it's on council property.
I think it probably is. I need to check that out.
It might be worth writing to the conservators, just to be on the safe side, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we hold? Well, if we need to engage with stakeholders on that, why don't we hold that to the next submission? And then I'll go back on an idea we have to speed up the submission process. I think Councillor Pearce has got a question.
Well, it's not so much a question as a comment. I know from experience that if you leave cast iron pipes and they're painted, they'll lose that paint. It will come off pretty quickly, and you're left with a rusty cast iron. So it's got to be looked after fairly often if we wanted to maintain the best look.
So then, there's an ongoing revenue cost to it.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay, well, let's put a hold on that one.
But that's there anyway, whether or not it's locally listed or not. And I would like to add that there are a number of others in the borough which have been suggested that we should also add to the local list. So if we hold this one over, I can put others with it.
That may be more sensible and put it all as a group. But I think if we let's make sure we've engaged with everyone who would have a view. Excellent. Okay, so 2.14 the Art Deco commercial buildings. Does anyone have any questions on that? Councillor Latif?
Nope, I'm okay.
Councillor Stanford? I can see Councillor Pearce is burning.
No, I'm fine for that.
Cool. Councillor Pearce, go for it.
Yes, it's basically a question. They all look in fairly good shape, but some of them look as though they're not used. If they're not used, how do we keep them, or how do we persuade the people who own them to keep them looking where they are now?
Well, they're all actively being used at the moment. They're all active businesses, or they're the Jubilee Centre is one that's divided into smaller units, but others are have businesses in them. They're all in use.
Okay.
Nothing derelict at all.
Cool. Does anyone else? So sorry, Councillor Pearce. 1 second. Did anyone else have any questions? Councillor Quilliam?
Yeah, it's just a quick one. There's a piece at the end that says there was a comment essentially worrying that this could restrict improvements that would help improve its carbon footprint in the future. Is that a sort of genuine concern, or is it that something that...
I think it was a concern of a particular owner, and really it's not very relevant because it doesn't mean that there aren't things that they can do inside to improve the carbon footprint. And there isn't any, because they're existing buildings, there isn't any pressure on them doing so, even though it might be a good thing to do. But and they can do things internally, which isn't a problem.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions on that? Councillor Pearce, you want to come back on what you were saying?
Yeah, unless these some of these photographs were taken, and I don't wish to belittle what we're going through at the moment, but especially Jubilee Centre looks as though it's been taken this month because everybody's working from home. And if you have these like this, they do tend to be a target for various other unquestionable activities. So they're going to lose, I mean, not that it's anything to do with locally listing them, but they look great as they are. What a pity to put them at danger.
Mm. Jill, why don't you expand on that point regarding Prop 21 and 25, because you referenced in your report about the standard not being up to.
Yes, they are perhaps not as quite as impressive as the other buildings, but they still have the strong horizontal lines. And I mean, number 21, although it's only one story, has quite interesting different colours in brickwork banding, and number 25, unfortunately the windows have been changed, but it still has all the strong Art Deco features.
Mm. Okay, so
yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions on this one? Okay, so can I see nods or here's yeses for putting this on the local list?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So the next one is
Good.
2.15 Mitcham Police Station. Councillor Latif, any questions?
No, I'm fine with this, thank you.
Councillor Stanford?
No problem, no questions.
Cool. I've got a question, but I'll just hold off in a second. Anyone else? Councillor Pearce?
Yes, mine's, I don't wish to appear sarcastic, but I'd like to know when that picture was taken, because I was in that police station last year and it didn't look anything like it does now.
Right. I don't know. I didn't take this picture, but from looking at the cars in it, it is obviously back a little while.
1967.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
keeping them up to the standard we'd like them to be, that if they are not in a good state, then someone's going to look at it and think, oh, that's going to cost a bit, you know.
Yeah.
It was, yes, it was built in 1960s. Now maybe that picture was not taken all that long afterwards, although I think the porch that was added is in this picture.
I mean, my query was more about just, well, firstly, it's on the conservation area. Is that correct, Jill?
Yes.
And
green.
Yeah, and just the level of, so when we say we're local listening, we're not protecting it from demolition, and it's not under threat at the minute. It is more just preserving its external features, so that would be changing windows and things like that.
Which should have planning permission to do any alterations like that, because it's not a residential building.
Of course. Okay. Anyone else got thoughts, comments?
I'm just looking at it on Global Earth at the moment to see how different it is compared to the picture. The windows seem to have been changed. They're further forward. Am I right with that, Jill?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know.
It's a completely, it does look very different from the drawing we're looking at. The front section of it, the windows are all brought forward. They're all in line. It's not a fair representation of what that building is, I think. It has been altered, and maybe we should
review it at another occasion.
Yeah, maybe we should defer this one because
Okay.
the information we've got before us and the information that exists is very different, really. It is, you know, as Councillor
Okay.
Pearce said.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah, I will. I'm happy to take that on board because,
brilliant.
as I say, I didn't take this photograph, so I can't
Yeah.
vouch for it.
No, of course. Does everyone else agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Good spot, Dennis. All good. And good spot, Linda. So 2.16, just along the road, Kedaway House. Councillor Najib, Councillor Latif, any questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Councillor Stanford?
No, I'm fine.
Cool. Anyone else? So yeah, again, it's just clarifying, Jill. I mean, I've been there very recently, so I don't think I think the picture matches the description and inspection report.
Yeah.
Is there any further notes you want to add?
Well, I took these pictures, so I know that they're genuine.
Good. All right. Well,
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I believe that there's possibility of a change of use there, but I haven't had that confirmed.
What would be the change of use from the business to residential? Is that
possibly? Yeah, that's what I've heard. But
okay.
Yes.
No worries. All right. So. All right. So, do we agree for Kedaway House to be put on the local list?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Good stuff. Great. All right. So, Jill, sorry, why didn't you address just the two items that weren't recommended to go on the local list?
Right. Yes, I did write quite a full report on these. It is a matter of the condition of them and the changes. Now, in particular, 5, 7, 9, 11, Upper Green East. These have been altered so much at the front that there is really no recognition of what they were like. Interesting buildings, but there's so little original left in those front elevations, I'm afraid. The other little group, they are much more original, but really not that special. And we didn't feel that they really compared with other parades of shops. Unless there's some investment put into them, and if what investment was put into them, then it could be another matter.
That's a very good point. And with the neighbourhood fund open for submissions, I probably would assume the Heritage Group would pursue that as an avenue. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Again, starting with Councillor Latif.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Councillor Stanford.
Okay, yeah. Well, of course, I know these very well. They're in Figs Ward. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of buildings, parades, and little shops and cottage type buildings around the Fair Green, and most of them have had some pretty unsympathetic alterations made to them. So, sadly, and talking about investing in, I don't think you get the take up. I mean, it's difficult enough anyway to lease these buildings out or whatever, because of they're just not suitable for modern day businesses. So one of the biggest problems, and so you know, there wouldn't be a rush to take them on, and so sadly, yeah, I don't think I don't think they can be listed, locally listed. Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Pearce.
I've got one comment. I mean, when you look at the pictures, the first two pictures, even the windows have been changed to something quite dreadful, really. You know, so they don't have any, even the two buildings side by side don't have any connection with each other. Look.
Very good point.
No, I agree with, you know.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So do we all agree with the recommendation not to locally list these two?
Yeah.
All right. So going back to the original recommendations at the start, so that's page 3 of the pack. So there was 3 recommendations there. So A, B, and C. We've agreed with a select few exemptions for holdover. That majority of those recommended should be recommended on a local list. We've agreed with the recommendation not to list those 2 properties, those 2 parades. And what I'm recommended to committee, and would be happy to debate and discuss briefly, is a recommendation C, which is if we look at the back, we see that we do an annual process of consultation anyway. It is just to bring this business to the committee on an annual basis and for council, so that there's a shorter time frame between consultation and the eventual review, pass, rejection of local listed sites. Is any comments or suggestions? Councillor Stanford first.
No, I'm fine with that.
Cool.
No. Yeah.
Anyone else?
No, it sounds fine.
Cool. Brilliant. Okay. Jill, I hope that wouldn't be too much of a imposition on your part. Okay.
What, to do it more frequently, I mean?
Or I think just sorry, as I think the policy itself has an annual review, annual consultation anyway. It is from the committee perspective to make sure the reporting is annual too. And I think given the time delay between your original hope to have the report before BPAC versus now, I think by chance the timetables will sort of work themselves out anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Latif, you just come in. Did you hear my recommendation C?
Yes, I'm very happy with that. Good.
Brilliant. Okay. Fantastic. So we can all agree that is taken then as business. Thank you very much, everyone. So again, in my haste, I missed item 2 and item 3, but item 2 we did right at the beginning of as I was alerted to it. So we did say we didn't have any declaration of pecuniary interest. And item 3, notes of the previous meeting. Tara, please do go through the notes of the previous meeting for us.
Thanks, Chair.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Starting video. Excuse me for not looking at anyone. I'm just looking at the screen so I can see the notes for the previous meeting at the same time. 1 second. At the previous meeting, we covered 2 items. One was the adoption of the Merton Sustainable Drainage Design and Evaluation Guides, and the other was the adoption of Merton's Statement of Community Involvement. And both of these are actually scheduled to go to Cabinet with your support. Cabinet taking place mid-June. So there's just a few comments. There weren't any particular actions apart from the resolution for a borough plan to support both of these documents being adopted.
Fantastic. I take it, does everyone agree with these as minutes from the previous meeting? Yeah. Fantastic. Good. So before, sorry,
Chair,
Tara.
could I just ask if I don't think Jill is needed for any other items this evening?
I was actually going to thank her for her time. So Jill, thank you very much for your time. this evening, and it was
Thank
fantastic
you.
having your report.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Excellent. Thank you very much, Tara. All right. So back onto the agenda. So we are going to now take the South London Waste Plan, which we've taken in various guises many times before. I believe Eban is going to introduce this as an item of business. So again, I propose my questions on the general policy of it, any changes, and then and basically pick up comment by exemption, and then agree or otherwise the report. So Evan, please do take it away.
Okay, just a quick introduction on some of the issues and where we are. So a common confusion that is with on this waste planning matter, I would just like to reiterate right at the beginning, say that it's a planning document. It's essentially does two things. It is to assess planning applications and to safeguard suitable sites for waste that's going to arise in our area over the plan period. Those two things, planning application and safeguarding our sites. It's got nothing to do with collections of waste or waste storage on residential or commercial or those other matters. You may be aware that the 4 boroughs, Merton, Kingston, Sutton and Croydon, they collaborated previously to create the 2012 adopted South London Waste Plan. That was a 10-year plan with similar functions. And now that plan is obviously coming to an end. And so we need to create the new next plan. So this time we're looking at a 15-year plan. So that will be 2021 to 2036. If I can just speak on 2 points, a main point in waste planning on that quantity of sites to be safeguarded is the issue of arising. So we do calculations, projections of what is the waste that is arising, that's generated within the planning area. So now the 4 boroughs are working together. We pool all our land and all the waste arisings. And at the same time, the GLA, the London, strives to deal with all its waste within its area. But as you can imagine, for instance, the City of London it generates waste, but it doesn't have space for waste management facilities. And so different boroughs have different abilities to deal with that. So there's an apportionment system where the Mayor of London, through formulas that are debated and accepted at the EIPs, that each borough gets an apportionment. So you have your arisings and then you get a target for your apportionment. So that apportionment is pooled. And in the South London Waste Plan area, the apportionment that we need to deal with over our plan period is 13% higher than what we actually will be generating ourselves. So the previous edition of the plan, which came to this committee, was just before we went out to public consultation. We consulted on our draft policies and the draft lists of sites in October to December 2019. You will see there's an appendix and it's listed on the website, all the issues that were raised and officers' initial responses to them. And now we at that next stage where we say we've consulted on the issues and options. This is now, we've taken on board, we've considered the matters raised, and we're now at the next stage, which is to submit the plan to the Secretary of State, who will appoint a planning inspector and we'll have an examination in public before the adoption. So this is called the submission version of the plan, which we are considering, which is presented to you tonight. And in this submission version, you can now see, following further work with the site operators, we now actually in Appendix 2, which is on, just by the way, on page 99 and 100, it shows you that we actually meet and we exceed today our projected apportionment for 2036. So, and those are on our existing sites. So we're already meeting those apportionments. So a related matter to that is all the existing waste sites that we are proposing to safeguard are in existing industrial or on existing industrial estates. And at the same time, we also have policies and needs to protect industrial land for employment uses. This is all the South London boroughs. That's our requirement to safeguard them. Sutton actually has a need to provide additional employment land. So what happens when you safeguard a site for industrial use? You actually protect it. You sterilize it to some extent, that it's protected for that use, and you can't use it for any other uses. You actually have to provide, if you go to another site, you must provide compensatory capacity so that we ensure we have sufficient capacity for our waste use. So there's this tricky balance between having sufficient waste to deal with your apportionment, but also having enough employment land. And this is an issue that comes up now in our policies, where, and as far as I'm aware, when we've met with GLA officers, that the policies are saying that because we can demonstrate that we can meet our apportionment, we are safeguarding our existing sites, but we're not going to allow any additional sites. That bit is unusual, there's no examples that the GLA officers could point to us quite readily in this case where people can demonstrate you can meet your sites, and then have a policy wording that says, and therefore we will not allow any more. So there, I just wanted to highlight the tension and the issue. It's referred to in the report also. It's a question of general conformity to the London plan. So those are the main issues, and this is where we are in the plan.
Thank you very much. So going to the phones first. Councillor Latif, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On 5.4, table 11 on page 82, could you even explain why, it's for my benefit actually, why Croydon's apportionment is less than Rising's?
Why don't we take threes before we do? So Councillor Stanford, do you have any questions?
No, not now, no, not at the moment, no, nothing.
Okay, no worries. Anyone else, hands up, any questions?
I have some comments I'd like to make, but yeah.
So let's do Councillor Pearce and then your comments, Councillor Kirby.
Right, can I?
Yep.
Being it's going to be a 15-year plan, I assume that a lot of consideration has gone into the fact that with population, although we're going in for more and more and more recycling, there will be, by the fact that the population of each borough, certainly Merton, has risen since I've been a councillor. What provision is there in the plan to compensate for the increase in population in your figures? Because I'm sorry, it's too much for me to take in everything. Looking through it is one thing, taking it all in is quite something else.
Councillor Kirby, sorry.
Well, mine was about the waste hierarchy, really, because I mean, I read through the plan. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is, the big issues that link us with the planning committee and the decisions that we have to take, and the amount of buildings that, are brought down, what happens to that waste, the sort of the same sustainability issues and the climate change issues that ought to be incorporated in that, and how government has actually relaxed the laws so much now that you can virtually do what you like. It's become quite horrific. One of the things I'm bothered about particularly is the lack of engagement with the producers of waste. I mean, because at the moment, this plan is largely about what you do with it when you got it, and but we don't want it in the first place. So, what action is being taken with regard to industry and supermarkets about the level of waste that they produce that we are practically forced into. I mean, I've tried to go non-plastic at times. It's almost impossible to go into the supermarket. And I mean, I've come from a generation where years ago there was no plastic, you know, when I was growing up, and we all managed very well without it. Toilet rolls were covered in paper. You know, I mean, I think there are things like, you know, freshness. Products probably last longer because they're probably preserved, and they're probably easier to produce in large quantities in this kind of format. But what are the four authorities doing as a collective to take action against local industry and local operators who are producing enormous amounts of waste that local residents are actually purchasing?
Thank you very much. So I think we've got 3 good areas there to cover. So obviously link with Croydon, the 15-year plan outlook, and as Councillor Kirby said, the local action on the producers, the supply side of things.
Okay. Actually, Councillor Latif and Councillor Pearce questions are related, so I'm going to try and answer them both in the same time. So and it relates to how the apportionment is the apportionment. This is what the mayor, the GLA, the Mayor of London's team, how they calculate the apportionment. So in those calculations, and I don't know all the details, there's a pretty big technical document into that, and it gets reviewed as part of the London plan review, the robustness. But in that, so population projections, employment projections goes into this formula, and your quantity of your employment land, so your capacity of your industrial land. So there's a formula that takes those factors into account, what your arisings are, what your population growth is, what's your employment land, and it looks at for each and every borough what your capacity, and in that apportionment allocation, these matters are taken into account. So I can't tell you specifically why Croydon is this figure, and that I'd have to go back and look at the report behind the London plan apportionment figures, but I can broadly explain how the methodology to get to the apportionment figures, and it deals with both population and employment land. Coming to Councillor Kirby's comment, there's a few things I can say. The waste plan is dealing in some ways, it's retrospective, that it needs to demonstrate, our requirement with this waste plan is to demonstrate that we can deal with the waste that's going to be generated and deal with the different types of waste. The more proactive side of waste management is with the South London Waste Partnership. So they have municipal waste management strategies, which sets out how each borough, what you're going to do, how you're going to drive behavior change. So there's that element. It sits outside of this plan, but this plan can needs to be able to deal with it, and we can certainly use policies in this plan. You can see some of the draft policies that when we at pre-applications and we're having discussions with developers, this plan comes into play, but also the whole of the local plan or the development plan documents, not just this plan on its own. This plan is relevant for waste management facilities, and it's got policies that pushes the or drives the scheme to be as sustainable as possible, that waste management facility. But when a scheme comes, the typical scheme comes in for mixed use or housing, there are other policies that actually within the rest of the local plan that says you need to be reusing the demolition construction waste that you on site, the materials, the sustainability assessments. So that's you must look at the assessment of the planning as the whole of the suite of planning documents within a local plan. Whereas this document, as I said initially, is just dealing with when you have a waste operator coming to do essentially a industrial facility, this document is used then to assess that scheme. So it's quite a niche document.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions, comments? So I'll bring back in Councillor. Oh, Councillor Cullen, sorry.
You may not have the answer to this, but given the current sort of pandemic and the fact that the waste profile at the moment is probably, and I haven't seen any figures on this, but I've heard anecdotally, obviously there's a lot more cardboard in waste at the moment. The waste profile generally is potentially quite different at the moment, or potentially quite different this year. Is there enough flex in our plan, sort of, given this is the next 15 years, to take into account changes in the waste profile that we haven't previously considered, like what we're potentially facing at the moment?
Why don't I call back in Councillor Latif and Stafford, and we can have the final round of questions with that question. Councillor Latif, any further questions?
No questions, just a comment that seems like Croydon are getting an amazing deal out of all the other four guys. We'd be better off without them, actually. But never mind.
Good point. Councillor Stafford? Councillor Stanford, sorry.
Just to add that it's a very interesting point that was made about the unprecedented situation we're going through at the moment, where so many of the shops and retailers have been closed down, pubs and restaurants, so they're not actually generating any waste at the moment. And but we still, so that is something that needs to be taken account of for the future, doesn't it? Yeah.
Okay, Eban, if you can answer those final three, and then we'll vote on the item.
So the question on the changes in waste. So there are policies you will see that talk about the waste hierarchy, driving waste as high up the waste hierarchy as possible. So we also have policies that now start with the previous draft that just wasn't around then, about circular economy and how we can accommodate circular economy. It's the waste, we should be able to deal with that. The waste plan would look at the facilities as and when the applications come forward. The quantity of land it's quite hard. There's a school of thought that says circular economy industries take a greater land take than traditional. But then when it comes with circular economy facilities, they can often not necessarily dealing with waste. They will get a waste as material, and they'll upcycle it, and they'll use it in a more of a construction, what you call a manufacturing process. So you're not dealing with waste. It doesn't have to be on a waste facility. You can do a circular economy type activity on an industrial site, because you are buying a material, or you're getting in a material, and you are changing that material, and you're upcycling, or you're using it again for something else. So it's not a waste management facility as such. It's actually an industrial facility that's taking something, getting a material, processing it, and selling it on. So it's not necessary that all the as we can foresee, I mean, this is a 15-year plan, so as much as we can foresee, not all the those kind of processes necessarily have to deal in the kind of waste that we are currently dealing with. A lot of the waste industry, a lot of the figures, a lot of the assessment looks backwards. And that's the reasonable evidence we have. We look at 5-year historic figures, so that we get to calculate the quantities that we need to deal with. But of course, how things go forward we just need sufficient flexibility. And the quantity of land that we're dealing with, we feel that we can deal with that. And we actually have some sites which are listed also in that Appendix 2 that has some capacity for intensification. Okay. So there's more flex.
Yeah.
beyond our projections.
Good. Thank you very much. So rounding this piece of business up, so we've got two recommendations. One is obviously recommend at the report to Cabinet for submission to the Secretary of State, and the second one is that we delegate any amendments made arising from subsequent examinations to be made by the Director of Environment in consultation with the Cabinet member. So two queries there. Are we happy with having this document recommended as such to Cabinet? So that's A, agreed. Thank you very much.
Agree. Yeah.
Brilliant. And recommendation B, are we happy that any recommendations, any amendments arising, or do we want to put any thresholds within that at all? No?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed? Agreed.
Yes.
So A and B agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Brilliant. So thank you very much for taking the time to go through this report, and have a good evening, Evan.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Tara, why don't we go on to the next item of business? So that's the update on the local plan policies. Would you mind introducing the topic, please?
Thank you, Chair. This really is an update report, and we're not asking councillors tonight to make any decisions on it. So please take as long as you like to, if you have any future questions, for example, rather than go through such a fairly long report tonight. Really, it's a summary of where we are on planning policies and how things are progressing. Just to recap on the timetable, we'll be coming to you in September's Borough Plan Committee with a draft local plan recommending the final consultation on it. It will contain all these policies in great detail. It will contain a whole list of all the sites you've seen, and it will contain a giant map, if you like, to show where open spaces should be designated and where town centre boundaries and nature reserves and flood risk areas are. So it's an awful lot of information in one 2-inch thick document. And there isn't really, however much we try to break it up and use graphics to make it more easy to read, local plans, as many of you know, are not, they're pretty dense documents. So this report really is a summary of where things are now. There's a few key areas that are fairly fixed and we're very confident about, and there's a few key other areas that are more in a state of flux, I would say. So areas that we're very confident about would include things like flood risk. We have a lot of information on climate change that's emerging from the Council's climate strategy, so we're pretty confident that that will be secured as the Declaration of Climate Emergency progresses through Council over the summer. Areas that are in a bit of a state of flux would include some aspects of housing. There is still debate at a national and mayor's level as to how many homes each borough should have. The other area that's now in a bit more flux is the issues with the economy. You'll be very aware that there's lots of questions being asked about how we work in the future and where we work, and how the current situation that we've gone through for only 3 months will be reflected in bricks and mortar and travel in the future. I don't think anyone knows that now, but we have to be able to come to you with a plan that casts our best forecast really by September. And luckily there's lots of work being done right across the world on how things might change. As Eben says, for the waste plan, what we need to do is make sure that the plan gives a degree of certainty, but is sufficiently flexible to accommodate changes in the future. I think that will be quite a challenge, but we do have this forthcoming consultation and some work next year to be able to look at that. Chair, if anyone has any questions on any aspects of policy, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Tara. Why don't we take questions in rounds of 3? Councillor Latif.
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Councillor Stanford.
No, I'm fine with that. Thanks.
Cool. I've got a question, but I'll wait at the end. Councillor Pearce.
It was just a general comment about, especially in one area like the economy, surely we'd be very unwise to make any set decisions even in the next 6 months, because we have no idea how it's going to be in 6-12 months time, and that must be making it much more difficult to set any sort of targets. Did you hear that?
Yeah, no, good point. I did. To anyone else, for anyone else?
Yeah, the Article 4 direction and the selective landlord scheme. Can you just comment on that, please, Tara?
Councillor Quilliam, anything else?
Oh yeah, my hand was disappearing off the other side. So could you just, so what's coming to us in September, is that then going out to further consultation, if I understood correctly? The sort of very detailed set of documents that are coming through, and given that presumably there is that, if there is a consultation, is that there is chance to feed in some of the kind of presumably data and experiences that we've picked up in this year, in this period, and have a look at some of what may be coming down the track.
Tara?
And to answer Councillor Quillam's question first, yes and yes. So yes, this consultation in September is coming up to feed in what we're learning now, what we're all learning now, and also to refine things next year. Councillor Kirby, you asked about the Article 4 and the landlord scheme. I promised you something I couldn't deliver when we spoke the other day. I promised you I'd feed back to you tonight, and I'm afraid I can't. But what I will do is I will chase a reply for you next week. For everybody's benefit, there is a focus on landlord licensing and potentially restrictions on allowing houses to be converted to something called houses of multiple occupation, or HMOs for short. That requires a lot of evidence, because councils can't simply impose restrictions on without being very, very sure that it is planning system that's the solution and the problem, rather than say crime or disorder or something else. So I will update Councillor Kirby, and I can update other councillors on the progress of those two things.
Okay.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay. My question was actually relating to, touches on Councillor Quilliam's point about changes since a lot of these policies were formed, particularly relating to the transport strategy and items T64 and T65 on page 178. So we're talking about well-being and interconnectivity and managing communities and transport links. How, in a plan in September, how will we take into account some of the new learnings from that for those policies? And again, given that we know the Overview and Scrutiny Committee are looking at making changes, particularly to cycling arrangements, following the government grant, how further do you feel this will evolve, given the renewed focus and support for non-car travel?
I think there's always been a great focus in Merton on promoting walking and cycling and active travel through the planning system. And also the council's current local implementation plan does just that as well. Obviously, with the massive seismic global changes in the past few months, we can't really predict how that will go in the future, but many of the initiatives that are being driven out of those, the immediate initiatives, don't require planning permission, so they won't be the subject of this plan. However, we will be taking the information that comes out of that. So, for example, let's take new cycle routes or pavement widening. We would use that information that's produced to focus on the maps in our plan, and to be able to say, well, now this particular pavement's widened, or there's a proposal for a cycle route here, which there wasn't before. Developments in this area should link up with that particular cycle route, or developments in this area should ensure that they leave a wider pavement than usual because pavement around has been widened. So if you like, we take the data and use that. And that's updated all the way through the 15 years of the plan. It's not a static piece of data that comes now. So if something happens in 3 years' time to widen a pavement or improve cycling, the people developing in 3 years' time will have to take that into account. So what the policies will say is you must prioritize this and you must use the latest data to inform your development. But the actual data will keep being updated all the way through the plan.
That's fantastic. It's really, really reassuring to know that. Okay, so if there are any further questions, queries, please do contact Tara separately outside of the meeting, and no doubt we'll probably recap again in September on the progress of everything when we get the draft report. Thank you very much. So on to the very, very last item. Is there any other business, anything at all? Any further questions, comments? So I'll start on the phones. Councillor Stanford.
No, fine, thanks. No, fine.
Brilliant. Councillor Latif.
I had a question on the for Tara, but maybe you're saying I should.
Oh no, if it's
it's a very quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Tara, on page 175, regarding Wimbledon Village, you're saying that you're going to do an economic assessment, including any future retail demand for retail offices, etc. As you know, Paul McGarry sits on the Wimbledon Village High Street Group, and he'll tell you that the problem with the Wimbledon Village is the footfall. It just does not have that. So what kind of assessments and how will you determine what the future demand for retail and office space is there? Because it's very, very different to the Broadway. As you go from the Broadway up to the village, the footfall falls dramatically, and the turnover of businesses is probably every 2 years. You'll find that businesses are closing there on a regular basis. So my question is, what kind of assessments are you intending to do that will actually quite closely portray what's happening in the village?
Tara?
The economic assessment looks right across the borough. First of all, it starts at sort of high macroeconomic level, where Merton sits in London, in the country. But then it does drill down, especially from a sort of town centre perspective, to really bespoke specific areas. So there will be a section on each of our town centres, including Wimbledon Village, including North Mitcham. And it looks at all sorts of things. It looks at the turnover. It looks at lots of data about what type of businesses are there, how long they've been there, what the business rates are like, what the rental yields are like, all sorts of background data. But it also takes maybe more subjective qualitative views into account. So often they'll do a business survey of about 1,000 businesses across the borough, and they'll ask groups like Business Improvement Districts and indeed the Wimbledon Village group what they feel the issues are. So it's not just based on data, it's also about how people feel about the town centre. Also, last time we did an on-street survey where we asked people using the centres and the areas how they felt about it and what they'd like to see changed and why they came here or why they didn't go to somewhere else. And all that really comes together in the assessment. So if you like, it's not just one piece of information. And usually it often pushes out things that we already feel that we know. So it often tells us, for example, about footfall falling off. Sometimes it bursts our perceptions. Sometimes there is a perception that an area is maybe in a certain way, and it turns out that it is a perception. In reality, it's not felt to be that way by the majority of people, or the data doesn't show it's that way. But it does focus down, and it will look specifically at the Wimbledon Village and the surrounds to give us a picture of what's happening and what we might do about it. And it's great that the group is there, because actually that's, as Paul McGarry says, it's often about the public realm as much as the businesses occupying the shops.
Fantastic. Does that answer your question, Councillor Latif?
Yes, thank you, Tara. Very good. Thank you.
Good. Excellent stuff. All right. Well, Doesn't look like there are any other business at all. No, no, brilliant. Thank you everyone for your time, and big thank you to Tara and her team and officers who helped made tonight a reality. And thank you very much for your patience bearing with my chairing and missing items out and tweaking things. Anyway, thank you very much again, and take care.
Thanks, Aidan.
Thank you.
Thank you.